Welcome to the 𝙄𝙙𝙪𝙧𝙬𝙚 podcast. I'm Rami, the host of this episode, and today I'll be speaking with Idins, who's a trainee at CMS, the founder of LittleLaw, and a New York qualified attorney. So thank you for joining me today, Idin.
Thanks, Ravi. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So just to sort of knuckle down into it, you're a trainee at CMS, as I discussed, but you're also a New York qualified attorney. So could you discuss your legal journey, including why you decided to sit the New York bar exam?
Yeah, sure. So my legal journey, I guess, started at uni. I started first as an economics student and then changed my degree to law. But from then on, it's just been law all the way. And I studied law at Nottingham. After graduating, I had a couple years between graduating and then getting the training contract offer, which I think happens to quite a lot of people. It was, again, just I was doing applications and just nothing was really landing. And I always had an interest in potentially going abroad to work and wanted to develop the opportunities I'd have abroad. So that was the reason that I considered taking the New York bar in that space after graduating. So I did it immediately after graduating, actually like a year after graduating. That was when I did the exam. It was a tough process. The prep process was tough. I did a 6 months prep course and went to New York. You can prepare from anywhere, but you have to do the exam in New York. Went to New York, did the exam, and luckily passed. So it's something that I have got, and I got that before I started my training contract. And the intention is currently, I guess, more long term in terms of what benefit that will have, because I'm in my training contract now and I'm 7 months into the 2 years. So it's not something I'm using now because I'm working in London. But long term, it's something that I'm glad I did. I'm glad I got, and hopefully long term, it's something that I'll be able to use as well.
Yeah, so I read that maybe half or maybe less than half of people who actually sit the exam actually pass. So would you say it's a personal achievement for you that you managed to pass this exam, being out with the United States and New York specifically?
Yeah, it's a tough exam. The pass rate is low. The foreign student pass rate is even lower. But I would say about the exam, a lot of people build it up, and like even when you're in the exam, this happened to me. Like people, because it's a 2-day exam and you have lunch breaks, so you'd have like 4 sessions, and even between the sessions, I'd have people like come up to me and like try and like scare you about like these stats. It's very odd. I don't know why, but the statistics are what they are. It is a difficult exam. In terms of my advice to UK students, I would always say that the law in the New York bar exam is probably not going to be a challenge for you. The content is not that difficult. It's pretty similar to what you're learning in uni, because it's common law. So contracts is pretty much the same. Land law is the same. Trust is similar. So torts is pretty much exactly the same. A lot of it's super similar in that sense. So that's not going to be the sticking point. There are some new areas of law, of like federal civil procedure and constitutional law of US, but like you'll pick them up. The challenge is usually the exam itself, and the exam itself is just this 2-day. 1 day is completely multiple choice, where they can choose from like every topic that you have. So it could be like a land law question, then a tort question, then a criminal question, and you just have to keep switching gears. So the challenge is the exam technique more so than the law. So I would always encourage people, if they want to do it and they've done a UK LLB, I'd say that they're halfway there, and that you can get there. The benefit of doing it as a UK student is that you get to that qualified stage much sooner than a US student, because in the US, law is a postgraduate degree. So you'd have to do a degree, then do law, then then sit the exam. But if you're applying to New York, they're quite happy as long as you've done a 3-year LLB degree in the UK. So I found myself sitting alongside people who are much older than me when I did it. And some people actually like strategically come and study in the UK to then like American students and Canadian students who I met there like would come and study in the UK so they can like benefit from this. So there are benefits from doing it as a foreign student. It is tough, but I would always encourage people to do it, and it's not as scary as people say. But yeah, I did, to answer your question, I did consider it personal achievement to pass the bar exam when I sat it the first time.
Yeah, and I know personally one or two people who came from the United States to the UK to study law. Because obviously, you know, as you touched upon, it's a postgraduate degree in the United States, and of course, the legal fees or just the fees for studying university, compounding over that time is, I imagine, quite expensive. So no, that is definitely does make sense.
Yeah.
So what situations do you think would be beneficial for a UK law student to actually sit the bar exam?
I would say, as I said, it's not something I've been able to use at work. But I would say if you have an interest in potentially pursuing these global opportunities, that's kind of my intention at this stage. I would say that it's an asset in that sense. One thing that I would maybe warn against is to think that once you're New York qualified, that means you can just walk into a job in the US. That is like step one of like maybe like 6 steps, and the other ones are like very difficult. Like they could be visa issues, competitive, like no different to here. If you're applying to a job in the US, it's going to be competitive. Again, that thing that benefited you in terms of being able to get you through the New York bar earlier, which is the fact that you've only done a 3-year degree, could come to be a challenge when you're applying against people who have like 2-3 degrees, like 5 years older than you, a bunch more experience. So I would say for me, it's more of a long-term thing, an asset that I'm hopefully that's going to open a few doors for me more long-term. Short-term, I do know people who have passed the New York bar and landed jobs in the US, maybe not directly as practicing lawyers, but some sort of like legal related job. But that's not something that I thought was feasible. I kind of looked into it, but then I was also applying for training contracts here, and as soon as I got that, then my focus is completely on seeing out my training contract here and working at the firm I'm at now.
Yeah, so the sense that I've gained is that the benefits can be the personal achievement of actually, completing this notoriously tough exam, but also, increasing your opportunities. Even if you don't think, in the next 2, 3, 4 years that you're going to move abroad, long term, it can maybe, always help you, at least increasing your opportunities abroad, and therefore maybe something that the students may consider. So moving on. Yeah, and moving on from the New York bar exam, obviously you founded LittleLaw, and LittleLaw is a household name among students across the United Kingdom, and I'm sure abroad as well. So can you tell me the backstory, how you actually founded this this media platform, and the work you had to do to actually build it up to where it is today?
Cool. Yeah, sure. So LittleLaw is, for those who don't know, it's a site that I started back at university, which aims to basically summarize news stories and kind of not just summarize and then I guess repackage and refocus them in a way that's beneficial for law students. And the story behind it is that I was applying for training contracts and VEC schemes in second year and first year, but this was born in second year of uni, and in Nottingham at the time. And we had a few talks from different grad recruiters and at different firms. And someone asked, pretty much every time someone asked, like, what's the main mistake that students make? And aside from stuff like spelling and grammar and I don't know, like naming them a wrong name and stuff that you just shouldn't do, or it's like easily avoided, they said lack of commercial awareness. That's one of the things that we see. We see people who have like A's at GCSE, A's at A level, and like high 2-1s first at uni, but they just don't know anything beyond what's in their curriculum of what they're learning, which is held against them. And like to that point, I kind of in my life thought, oh, just, you know, as long as my grades are fine, I'll be fine. But that was the first time I realized that there's another layer of, you know, knowledge or awareness, if you want to call it, that you should need to have to like succeed in this process. And I wasn't succeeding in the process, so I knew I was doing something wrong. And that's when I started trying to work on developing my commercial awareness. So it was completely just as a way to develop my commercial awareness. What I would do is I'd read news stories and write summaries just in a notebook. I always have a notebook wherever I go. I have one here now. Let's see this one. But yeah, like whenever I'd read anything, I just write like little summaries, like, and it would focus on what's the important thing that's in here. Like, what's the big picture effect, which is the exact subheading that we use on LittleLaw. So I'd read the news story, and like the specifics are not the thing that was interesting to me or that I was focusing on. I was like, what's the big picture effect? Why is this important? How a business is going to react to this? How a law firm is going to react to this? That was the angle. And that's what I would do to try and develop my commercial awareness in like a sort of structured way. And then from that, I kind of made this template where I'd write news summaries, and a few of my friends saw it and they thought it was cool. So I made a website, just bought like a Squarespace package at the time, and like was paying like monthly for that to just have a website up and to see if other people would read it. And that's how it started. I just started putting these summaries up and promoted it through my university law society in Nottingham, which is how we got like the first like 2,000 or 3,000 like followers of LittleLaw. And what it's become today is something very, very different to that. That was back in like 2016. So now we've got a team who do a lot on it. We've got a team, mostly students, who are writing. They're all really, really good. Yeah, we've got some social media people. We've got people working on video content. And now I'm just happy to be part of this big team because I do a lot less on it now, and there's a lot of other people who are involved in running it, and they do a brilliant job of keeping up the output and actually building on what I ever started at the beginning. So it's much better now.
Yeah, and your tagline is, or your motto is, battling commercial unawareness in aspiring lawyers. So who thought of that tagline? Because that's pretty. I think that really summarizes, you know, what LittleLaw is, and you know what all of these platforms actually do.
So I think there's a funny story. I once saw it somewhere, and I thought that there was another guy who was writing for LittleLaw at the time, and I thought he wrote it. And then for months, I thought he wrote it. And there was only a couple of us involved at the time when I came up with that. When I first saw this tagline, and I asked him, "Oh, did you come up with this battling unawareness line?" And he said no. So I think I did it, but I forgot. So I think I came up with it. I'm going to claim it if no one else is, but I think I came up with it. Yeah, I think it catches what we're doing. So it's aimed at aspiring lawyers, not just law students. And that's a conscious decision we made, just because it's not just students necessarily. A lot of people are law grads. A lot of people readers are career changers. I know a teacher who emailed me who uses it as a resource to like help just teach, like, I think they're like high school students in the US, so they're not even necessarily going to be going into law, but he thought it was a cool way of kind of like focusing on the wider issue. So yeah, it's the challenge is that battling commercial unawareness, and I think commercial awareness is something that, you know, no one really, very few people have unless you have a reason to have it. Like I went my whole life I'd be aware of the news, but I would not know wider shifts that are happening in the world, or like I'd never read a news story. I'd be much more focused. I'd be like, oh, X% is like I don't know, like unemployment rate this year, like this number. And I'd be focused on the detail. Whereas I think the point of commercial awareness, or the point of LittleLaw at least, is to kind of do the opposite and be like, all right, that's that's the detail, but what is that an indication of? What wider thing? And it's a challenge that a lot of people have when they're doing their applications, because you've never had a reason to be commercially aware, and now you do. So I'm trying to basically, with LittleLaw, the aim we have is to try and resolve that problem.
Yeah, and on your website you have, a few different sponsors. So could you discuss maybe how you actually, gain those sponsorships and the help that that sponsorship has actually provided to LittleLaw?
Sure. So we work with sponsors on the occasion. And yeah, it's just some of the people on the website weren't necessarily sponsors, they just did content with us, which is also good, because most of the people we speak to externally are people who are, have a lot of knowledge about the world of law and the sort of thing we're trying to teach. But yeah, I think the working with the sponsors is something that is we've done a bit of. It's not our main focus at the moment, but it's useful. It's good to be able to benefit from their knowledge, as I said, and hopefully for the sponsors, we have an audience of students, aspiring lawyers, not necessarily students, but they're all engaged. They're all willing to develop their commercial awareness. They all want to do more. So I like to think that the people who are following LittleLaw are like, it's probably an effective channel for people who want to reach out to aspiring lawyers, because by definition, the people who are following this thing have taken that proactive step to go on the website or sign up to the newsletter or whatever.
Yeah, and on top of LittleLaw, so aside from the project that you actually worked really hard on and it's become a household name, you also have a YouTube channel which has over 1,500 subscribers. So why did you decide to found a YouTube channel, aside from LittleLaw, and what sort of content do you tend to post on it?
So the YouTube channel is an interesting one. It's been neglected for the past 3 or 4 weeks, maybe more because of work. But yeah, it's still I plan to return. I feel like the last couple of videos have been like one video, like a 5-week break, but that's just, I need to like do a few backlogged videos so I can have a couple to go in a row. But yeah, the YouTube channel was, I guess the idea was born out of the mentoring I started doing. There's a couple of reasons I started it, but the reason that I made it what it is that I started doing mentoring through a platform called 𝙄𝙩𝙩𝙚𝙦, which I really enjoyed. And I was talking to my mentee, and we walk through the issues he's having, and I'd like give my advice and talk about my experiences. And I just thought it might be interesting to, instead of talking to someone on a one-to-one basis, if there was a way of doing it as a kind of like more like one-to-many way. So I thought YouTube was a good way to do that. Well, I thought using social media was a good way to do that. And it was during lockdown, so I think like everyone was like kind of like had a bit more time and wanted to try something new. I also tried to learn to bake bread, but that did not go as well. But yeah, so that's how it started. That was the thinking behind making it law related. In terms of why I wanted to make a YouTube channel, I've always like been interested in making videos. So it's kind of like a selfish endeavor in that sense, that I was like, oh, this would just be a good like structured way to practice. Like I'd be forced to make videos and I'd have to learn how to like do editing and like color grading and stuff. So that was just another reason that I wanted to do it personally. I was gonna like wanted to start making videos about stuff. As a kid, I'd do it from like when we went on holidays and stuff. But now I thought it would be a interesting angle to take. So it was my interest in the videos, which was like the personal, like selfish reason. And then the, I guess, more like selfless reason was the mentoring thing. But it was a bit of both.
Yeah, and obviously you touched on the fact that you maybe sort of neglected your YouTube channel a little bit, and there's a bit of inconsistency maybe. So what are your long-term plans for the YouTube channel? Do you intend to, continue posting sort of law-related videos? Do you maybe want to, venture outside of the law? Or is this maybe something that you're just working with, sort of, playing by ear, you could say?
No, I have a plan. My plan is definitely to just stick to law-related videos and application-related videos. It was meant to be a year. So I started in the summer and it was meant to end this summer, but I don't think I'll have got all the videos that I wanted out in that time because of just my own inconsistency in posting. But I want to start it as platform just to focus on the law and law related things. But more long term, it will just be a platform, or the plan is for it to be a platform that just reflects things that I'm generally reading or listening to, or come across ideas that I've come across that I can like kind of put across in this way, because I think I'll kind of run out of law application advice after a year, because I think like I try to go through the stages in the videos I made. So it was first about like applications, then about like, it later went on to like I had quite a few about applications, but then like onto video interviews, and I kind of have like a few plans of what to addressing assessment centers and like doing my tips for that. But I think unless I completely like change my views on one of these things and I feel like I have to redo it, I think once they're up, that they'll be a fairly good reflection of like what I'd recommend for each type of each stage in the application process. And I think the application process is, you can kind of break it down quite like it is quite modular. You've got each stage. So in answer to your question, law related for probably the next like at least 20 videos, and then expanding more widely into just anything that I'm thinking about posting.
Excellent. And I guess one final question, what, one piece of advice would you have for aspiring lawyers?
One piece of advice that I'd have for aspiring lawyers, I would say that one piece of advice, I guess it's not a piece of advice, it's just a little statement. The road to I don't try and sound more poetic. I'll just say it as it is. It's a tough road to getting a TC offer, and I honestly think for pretty much everyone I've ever spoken to who wants it, it's just a case of when they get it. So I really don't know anyone who's wanted to get a training contract and hasn't been able to get it. The only question is how many years it takes. And sometimes you'll get to a point where that assessment will just sway too far to the other way, and you decide that it's not worth you doing more years of applications, or at least not for the time being. But I would say that in my experience, everyone I've spoken to, including myself, has eventually got to that stage if you persist, and if you really focus on the application stage, on each module, each stage, step of the process, and try and identify where your weaknesses are and reach out to people to help you develop them. For myself, I started uni in 2014. I started doing applications in 2015 in my second year for vacation schemes, and I got my TC offer in end of 2019. So that was like 2 or 3 years after I graduated. I also changed my degree, so I was like 1 year behind or whatever. So I'm older than most people in my intake now, and that's just something that like it isn't a problem. People also overstate that. So I'd say don't worry about that. And if you want to get a TC or get onto that route for qualification in the UK, it's mostly a case of when, not if you persist.
Excellent. And of course, you can increase your chances of success in your TC and vacation scheme applications by watching Idin's video. All of his videos on applications, as we touched upon, he has many, staging, like video interviews, the written application, and different elements as well. So that will be linked to this podcast episode. But thank you very much, Idin, for featuring as a guest. We covered 3 very different topics, but your career journey has been very interesting, and it's been a pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks, Remy. It's been a pleasure to be on the podcast.